Hi, my name is Michael Beisa, and I'm here to present on HTTP and URL in Java today. So just to begin with a brief introduction about URL. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and it's a type of URI or Uniform Resource Identifier. What it's basically used for is identification of a resource that is to be accessed. So there are many protocols which use URLs. The most common one that people know about is HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and there are other protocols as well, such as FTP, HTTPS, and a host of other different protocols for different purposes. So a URL structure follows what's presented here. This is an image that I found on constructing a URL structure. You have your scheme at the beginning, a colon slash slash, and then you have different pieces of information about the domain, the path, in order to reach the resource that you are trying to access. So in Java, there is a URL class which is a method that extends object and implements serializable, and it's used to construct the URL which points to a particular resource on the World Wide Web. So your most common constructor is just going to take a string of the URL, and a few useful methods to know about this class include open connection, which opens that link to the particular resource that you're trying to access. You have a set function, which allows you to change or to set or change the URL that is linked to the variable that you've created. You can convert a URL to a URI, and you can compare two URL resources together to see if they're the same. Along with that, Java has a URL connection class, and in particular, we're going to be taking a look at the HTTP URL connection class. So HTTP URL connection extends URL connection, and the difference between a URL and URL connection is the URL is the address that is intended to be reached, and the URL connection is the class that does the actual connecting and retrieving the information. So within the HTTP URL connection class, you have the ability to set the request property, and that's going to be either a GET or a POST. So a GET is, if you take a look at an URL, you'll see a query after the main resource. It's a question mark followed by a series of key value pairs. And a POST has query information as well, but that's hidden from the URL that's passed via a different method. So with the HTTP connection class, a few useful methods to know about are set request method, which allows you to set that GET or POST. A set request property, you can get the response code. Your response code is going to be your whether you successfully connect to the web page or not. The most common unsuccessful connect is HTTP 404 code. And then get input stream, which allows you to take the resource and retrieve it via an input stream, which we'll see here in a bit. So in taking a look at how to work with URLs and HTTP in Java, I basically narrowed it down to 6 steps that you would want to do. First, you need to define the URL target, and with that, you'll create a URL object, and with that object, you'll open a new connection. With that connection, you can set your request method and property. You can then retrieve the information via an input stream, and then with that retrieved information, you can manipulate it as you need, as needs be. So with that, let's go ahead and go through a demonstration with the program that I created. So bring this over here. So this is a very simple HTTP URL program that I put together. So we have my main class here. Up here, we've only got one private variable for the class. This is the user agent, which is going to be used. Now, the user agent is basically a definition of what browser and some other pieces of information that can be used when sending or when setting your connection. So there's two other methods in my program: the get info, which I'll go through here shortly, and then a parse HTML. Now, since parse HTML isn't the purpose of this, I'll just go over this briefly. I took the response and I used a library called JSoup in order to parse the returned HTML in order to develop the output that you'll see here shortly. Get info is where we'll see more of the URL work in action. So one thing that you'll notice is that I set up an exception to be thrown in case something goes wrong with the URL connection. So in my main class, you'll see that my attempt to use the get info here is surrounded by a try catch, and if anything fails, that exception will be thrown and then caught in the main, and then I'll be able to see a stack trace of what exactly is going on or where things are happening. So in the get info class, I first defined the URL, and I decided to just go with something straightforward, Yahoo Finance page on Google's stock price. So I found that to be pretty useful and pretty easy to deal with. Then with that URL string, I'm able to create a URL object and then create a HTTP URL connection. With that, I set the request method. I set the request property with the user agent that was defined earlier. And over here, I'm getting the response code, which allows me to see whether or not I successfully connect to the website that I'm targeting. And then I just display that URL and response code that I receive. From here, with the connection, I'm able to build an input stream. So the connection will return the input stream, and then that input stream is put into an input stream reader, which is then put into a buffered reader, which is the method that I use in order to retrieve the information. So with this, I am able to take that input and build a response using a stream buffer. And once that build is done, I close that input buffer and return the response string that I've come up with. So it goes back over here with that response string. I am then able to take the URL, and then with the JSoup library that I mentioned earlier, I'm able to parse that HTML, and using that information, I can do whatever needs to be done. So with that, let me go ahead and rerun this program for you to see. So it takes a second to build. And you'll see that the URL displays. I got a response code of 200, which is a successful response code. And then with the HTTP with the HTML web page that was returned, I'm able to build this table of stock prices for Google here, open, high, low, close, during a certain period of time that is available. So this is my brief demonstration on HTTP URL. I hope that this is useful for you, and if you have any questions, I look forward to hearing them and seeing how I can help out. Thank you.